Hi, this is Dan Harris, and welcome to the Ironbird Podcast. We're filming live from the NBAA event in Las Vegas in partnership with Flyhouse. Today's guest is Doug Gollan from Private Jet Card Comparisons. Doug, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
Do you want to explain what Private Jet Card Comparison is and what it does?
Sure. Private Jet Card Comparisons is a buyer's guide to private aviation services, jet cards, memberships, fractional ownership. Annual subscriptions, $500. We have an updated database of over 80 jet card, fractional, and membership providers, over 500 distinct programs, and you can compare them by over 65 different variables. So once a consumer subscribes, they can request an analysis. They answer some simple questions, and then within 3 business days, we give them a report which basically says, based on what they're looking for, here are the programmatic options that fit your needs, or in some cases, it makes more sense for them to do on-demand charter. Mm-hmm. So we save them time by getting them connected to the companies that have programs. And you know, these programs, the contracts go on for dozens of pages that fit their needs. Or, you know, if they're flying, their needs aren't right for a programmatic offering, we'll talk to them about using boutique charter brokers who can provide them more of a couture type service.
65 different options in just the space. Why do you think it's so complex? Is it on purpose?
Well, every time a company comes out and they say they're introducing a new program, they say they're simplifying it. Yeah. But usually it's even more complicated, and I say thank you because that's what keeps us in business. Yeah. But I think from a provider standpoint, when you're doing a guaranteed program where you're guaranteeing a capped or fixed hourly rate, within a specific call out and to specific geographic areas, you're also trying to protect yourself because there's so much risk. Yeah. If you structure the programming correctly, you can lose your shirt. Yeah. And so I think, they come up with the intentions of let's do it in a very simplified, straightforward, and then says, what about this? What if this happens? Right. What if this happened? Yeah. And that's why you get contracts that go for 30 pages. So I don't think it's intentional, but I think people think about, the jet cards and deposit program as being a risk with their money, but it's also a risk for the provider because they're guaranteeing that they're going to provide that service at a specific rate. You call 48 hours in advance and they have to get a plane from Wyoming to go to Oklahoma, and you're only paying for the occupied hours and all of that. So I think it's more indicative of how complicated the industry is.
This episode is brought to you by Charter Flight Support, the only coverage in private aviation that protects you when an aircraft mechanical issue stops your aircraft from flying. CFS not only provides financial support if the replacement aircraft costs more, they also help locate and book quality backup aircraft fast. Learn more at charterflightsupport.com, and don't forget to sign up for their newsletter, The Fix, for real-time insights on private jet trends, aircraft types, and rates. This episode is brought to you by Video Valet. If you care about having the best in-flight experience on your private flights, Video Valet offers up to 1.2 million movies, shows, magazines, and newspapers, all available on board without the need of expensive Wi-Fi or hardware. Eric and his team at Video Valet deliver fully customized iPads to ensure that your preferences are met on every single flight. Whether providing my kids with their favorite shows or allowing me and my wife to catch up on breaking news, I personally could never travel without it again. Video Valet is offering a special promotion to Ironbird Podcast listeners. Mention Ironbird, and Video Valet will add 1 free fully personalized iPad at no additional cost. Now, to the Ironbird Podcast.
Why don't you think there's not enough transparency in those jet card contracts that they need a jet card comparison for?
Well, I think it's complicated because different, you have really 3 types of options. You have people who are doing on-fleet jet cards. Yep. Then you have brokers, pure brokers that have jet cards. And you have huge brokers like the Sentient Jets, or Magellan is probably like $100 million, Jets.com. But there are also boutique brokers that have a fixed rate program And then you have hybrids, right, who
Yeah.
are doing on-fleet and off-fleet. And so it's complicated because they're trying to think of all the scenarios. Some of them have gone regional, but if you're offering a national program, it's sort of straightforward. You get a customer going from New York to Palm Beach. You can sort of figure out what type of pricing, what type of call out. But then, that customer also wants to go out to, Montana.
Yep.
But then when they're in Montana, maybe they want to go down to Texas.
Right.
And, the customer would like to have a solution that fits most of their needs.
Yep.
And when you start mapping out what the customer wants against the cost of providing that product or the service, that's when you go in, it's, on peak days, well, we need more time. And
we don't want to be a
this
plus
and
or minus 3 hour. Or,
so, you guys, I always tell people we have the easiest job in the industry because we only get $500, but we don't have to fly these people anywhere.
Yeah.
You're the guys who get the calls, and then you arrange a flight if you're a broker, and there's a mechanical. Then you got to get a recovery aircraft, and a lot of the jet cards guarantee recovery, at the same fixed rate. And, you saw it during COVID, the operators were, minting money because they'd have these guaranteed programs calling up.
Knowing that, hey, if Wheels Up calls me, I know they need me. I know they have to move contractually.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm gonna make sure they feel the pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Jack and I were talking about this, about there, and you can tell me if you've seen the same thing. We've seen with charter kind of slowly dipping down in demand, but the fractionals and the jet card custom clients have really grown. And we were thinking maybe that has to do a little bit with the operator greed during COVID.
I think so. You bring up what everyone's talking about here, right? The dip in charter demand, and I was trying to do some back of the envelope math, and I wasn't a C student, I was like a D plus student, so not an F but D plus, and if you look at during the surge, the biggest buyers of Port 135 lift were FlexJet, NetJets, the fractionals that had those guarantees. Then you had the programs like Wheels Up, right?
Yeah.
Where they were very successful selling memberships, and they had bought these fleets, they were having trouble integrating it, so they were doing these huge GRP deals. I think in one of their financial calls, they said like 30% of their lift was on GRPs, and so now nobody has GRPs. FlexJet and NetJet's plain sense, they've gotten more aircraft. So I think what's happened to a degree, I think there's still consumer demand, but all of that buying that the big fractionals and the big, programmatic guys were buying, that they're handling most of that on fleet, or NetJets with EJM, or FlexJet with their FX Select fleet. And the other thing that I would say, and everyone's like got a long face. We do a lot of research. We have not seen a dip in flying demand from our subscribers. They're into the programmatic stuff, but I think part of it is before COVID, you had to really work for your business. You had to go out, work leads and stuff. When we would do these analyses, Daniel, during the COVID peak, it'd say these 4 companies or these 6 companies. I'd hear back 2 weeks later, someone would say, I reached out to the 6 companies that you had on your list, and 3 of them got back to me, or 2 of them got back to me. And I would talk to I said, do you guys, and they would be like, Doug, it's like a fire hose. There are too many leads. We're not set up to even talk to the people. And so now it's reversed, right? Everyone's, we were talking before, jet card deals, everyone's 2 free hours and stuff.
Right.
And so I think a little bit of the perception that what's happening in the market is people forgot how it was in 2018 and 2019. And then from an operator perspective, I was, I won't say which operator, but I was sitting in the office with their head.
You can tell us which operator. We won't say anything.
I was with their head of sales, and it was it was during an NBAA, so you could start to narrow it down. And as we were talking, I'd see the notes passed in somebody from FlexJet, somebody from NetJet, somebody from Sentient, somebody from Wheels Up calling because they needed lift.
The lift.
And, I told the guy, I said, listen, business is business, go return the call. And he said, I don't have planes. He said, it doesn't. And so,
I don't think the issue is demand. I think the issue is lift.
Right.
The issue is completely lift. If we always talk about putting asses in seats. If you don't have seats, the guy that has the seats, the guy who wins, right? But what strikes me is these companies that sell jet cards and they don't even have an airplane. And I think that's crazy. But I want to get your take on it and how you see, because I think there's a financial accountability to those funds. But to that point, you've guaranteed a certain type of airplane at a certain time.
Right.
With guarantees. I can't guarantee I'm going to make it to dinner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but to that point, I think the dip in demand, I don't think there is any dip. I think the planes that we have today that are available are flying, and the ones that aren't available, they're not available for certain reasons: training, maintenance, parts. We've had we had one airplane sit for 2 months because couldn't get a windshield.
Right.
But the demand, I could have still put 40 hours a month. So now the numbers are skewed because I didn't get that lift. So, I would love your take on this, on the jet cards. These brokers. I mean, how many there's 90 jet cards now?
Well, we have over 80 different companies in our database that sell jet cards or fractional ownership.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy. I would think that number 10 years ago was probably 10.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing, it was more than that, but where the jet cards really took off, there were sort of two periods. One was that sort of post 9/11, you had Marquis Jet and Sentient, and that was at the beginning. And, Kenny Dichter was probably one of the best salespeople and promoters in the industry, right? Yeah. So with Marquis Jet and NetJets and then Sentient, that started, that was the birth of the jet card 25 years ago. And then when the financial crisis took place and you had 20% of the fleet was for sale, and all of a sudden, you guys probably remember, you could get a plane anywhere, right? That's why you had, all of a sudden, people were popping up with these jet cards on 8 and 10 hours notice, and people were saying fractional is dead because people didn't want to, with the financial crisis, people didn't want to make the 5-year commitment and
they
buy
didn't need the guaranteed lift.
And so the interesting thing, I think, is if you look back in that period, that's when you started to see all these 8, 10, 12-hour call-out jet cards. And so from 2010 to 2020, you saw the growth of the jet card. You saw traditional brokers adding fixed-rate guaranteed jet cards because if someone called them in the morning, you could get a plane for them in the afternoon. Yep. And so that took off. And then obviously with COVID, the world went in reverse again. Yeah. So I think, like most businesses, everything is cyclical. The fractionals took off for a couple of years. People were jumping in and buying planes, not knowing how much it costs. When you buy a plane, how much it costs
to actually operate it.
Yeah, about 12% of our subscribers own planes. And so why are they subscribing to private jet card comparisons? 60% of them have jet cards.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes you need 2 planes at the same time. Sometimes
or your airplane's down, needs a windshield. Or,
Yeah.
And I've heard all of these stories. So I always tell people it's like cars in a driveway. You have a convertible for the beach house, and then you have an SUV for the lake house. And, there's multiple solutions. And I think I understand from the provider standpoint, we can do everything for anybody. 50% of our subscribers use on-demand charter brokers because sometimes the programmatic offerings are not what they need. Yeah. They have a broker. Usually when people start in the business, they get referred from a friend who has Dan the broker, and Dan does a great job. Yep. And then maybe I ended up getting a share or a jet card. Yep. But Daniel, you did a great job. When these trips, my program doesn't have Hawaii in it. Could you give me some quotes for Hawaii? Yeah. You do a great job, and then, I do some more things. So I think it ebbs and flows. It's like a supermarket. People are buying different stuff. Some days you have a salad, the other days you have a steak. Yeah. And so I think one of the things in the industry, jet cards are a great solution. On demand, great brokers. I always tell people, if you have a charter broker, treat that you think does a good job, treat that person like gold.
Yeah.
Because it's a complicated industry.
Yeah.
Most people, are not, I don't want to say sophisticated, sounds bad, but you have over 100 different types of charter aircraft out there. And I've like I said, I hear all the stories. I chartered a Hawker 800 or whatever. Well, they didn't know that it doesn't have a lot of luggage capacity, things like that.
Yeah.
But that's why people, rely on you guys. You're the experts.
Yeah, and I think the problem, we talked about it earlier, is the educational side of things. You've got some sophisticated clients now, but from the brokerage standpoint, of course, there's obviously no barrier to entry.
Right.
And I know a jet guy. I know a guy that's got a phone. He knows a guy who's got a jet. Provides great service, but the value is in the educational process. Hey, I'm letting you know that hawker, I can take you, but not your bag. Well, what do you mean?
Yeah.
But the hawker just shows up, and then I'm not going to ship my sticks somewhere else. You know, so it just creates that. It's problematic for the consumer, but it's crazy. You hear the horror stories.
Yeah, and I think, what you guys are doing with Jet ASAP and platforms, it's another solution. And, for some people, a segment of the market, it's going to work, just like fractional is going to work. Yeah. And it's funny, you hear people, jet cards, they're going away. But I heard that with fractional 10 years ago. Fractional is dead. And, we've had 3 or 4 or 5 new fractional programs. Yeah. And I was, I think we were talking when we talked a couple weeks ago. My background was in travel trade publishing, so travel agent, media publications. I'm a media person. Yeah. And back in the 90s, Bill Gates said, now that I invented Expedia or Travelocity, whatever it was, you can throw your travel agent's business card away. And you hear about disintermediation and stuff. And the travel agency business, travel agents went down. The ones who were just writing airline tickets, they went away. The ones that are doing really well, guys, are the ones that are working with the ultra high net worths and the high net worth, because you can book the St. Regis in Rome on Expedia or online at hotels.com. You can book a 1-bedroom suite there, but what you do, these agents have relationships with the operators. Yeah. The agents have relationship with the hotel general managers and the sales directors. So when you're going to Rome, and you want to get the suite that overlooks the Spanish Steps, they call the general manager or the director of marketing and say, my very good client Jack's coming, it's his first time in Rome. Yep. They have lists, like you have lists with operators. Yep. We don't sell these tails because of X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, here's the no red wine tail. And
we don't want these suites because they overlook the back alley. Put Jack in one of these suites, and he's arriving at 9 a.m. Make sure, and because they have cloud, they have more bookings coming. The hotel does that. The person who books the online hotels.com, they're the ones overlooking the car park.
Yeah.
And so, different solutions for different people.
What do you think when a consumer is looking at a jet card or a program, what do you see as some of the biggest surprise or gotchas that they end up falling into?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think one of the problems, and this is really where we help people out, is they don't read the contracts. And so our database is based on the contract, so that helps us filter and narrow down based on the rules of the contracts and based on what you told us you want. Here's the match, right? Yeah. So it's a sort of a match game there. And then, when they get down to, they talk to the 4 or 5 companies, we always say, please just read the contract line by line, because there's something in there that's going to spur stuff. And I always say, listen, do as I say, not as I do, because I spend a lot of money on different insurance policies. I know when I put the claim in, I'm probably not covered.
Yeah.
I didn't read the fine print. I don't know what's in my AT&T telephone contract, but these contracts are designed to protect the provider, and so I think when people read them, they're like, oh, some of these, some jet card providers, they have clauses for mountain airports.
Yeah.
If you're flying into Aspen, and that's your trip, don't choose that provider. There are other providers that will offer the guarantees and, not the outs. And so we're really just trying to identify the stuff that these companies put in for a business reason, but conflicts with what the customer needs. And I think the biggest challenge is that, when you're dealing with that high net worth customer and you're a salesperson, and this industry has great salespeople, what is it when you're trying to sell something? Shut up, let the customer talk, here's a pen. And it's not like, well, let me go through the contract.
Yeah, line item about.
Right.
Let me tell you all the times where we're not going to be a fit.
And so it's not anybody's fault, but people jump in. Jack loves company X. Yeah. I call company X. You're like, Jack, he's a great customer.
Yep.
And you don't really understand that while Jack's a great fit for your program, I'm not, right? And I haven't articulated that. I'm just like, well, do you want my money or not? And so that's
But it's the jet card company's salesperson's job to jam everyone into. They want every customer, right?
Yeah.
They're not turning away customers.
But assumption is not education.
Yeah.
And so the thought process is, we talked about earlier about the T's and C's. By the way, there is no standard.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own version of a cancellation fee, term,
call out fee. Yeah.
What mountainous airport? Hey, here's the fee. Here's my pet fee. Yeah.
We
dealt with one the other day. It's like, I said there was going to be a pet on board. They charged me money, and the pet never showed up.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's why I have a business, right?
Yeah.
And it's it's all legitimate reasons. The stuff's in the contract, so we just try and help people sort through the stuff that would make a hiccup. And the other thing too is, I have subscribers. They'll sign up and they'll tell me this program is really awful, and it's like, well, what happened? And I was like, well, it's on the contract, page 7, whatever. And we just try and help make sure that people are talking to the companies if there's going to be a programmatic offering that match. And the other thing on the company side that we get a lot of positive feedback is, they get a lot of leads of people who are calling from O'Hare Airport because their flight got canceled, and they have no idea. So they're spending time educating a person who's not qualified. Basically, when somebody calls who's a subscriber to Private Jet Card Comparison, you're going to close probably 20 to 30% of those people. And so for the companies, and one of the reasons I think they share the data with us is they know we help make that process more efficient. We save their people time, we save the customer time. And like I said, we're agnostic. There are people who don't fit into the jet card mode, and we tell them, operators, platforms, sometimes it's what they're looking for. They need to own a plane. There's no program that's going to do it.
Well, I mean, it's the same with us. You want to be frictionless.
Yeah.
Completely frictionless. We don't care.
Right.
We joke in the office. We say, hey, it's like the phone bill. I don't care who you call. Just pay your bill.
Right.
Same thing.
What do you think for customers, if you were to say, all right, what makes a good charter customer versus a jet card customer versus a fractional customer? Do you see some similarities in each?
Well, sometimes it's the same person, just different missions.
But if you were to generalize?
Well, I think the people who end up going into the fractional, obviously it's a 50-hour plus a year flyer who's willing to make that commitment for, 5 years. Sometimes there's tax benefits. One of the things we provide is we have a list of great aviation attorneys. We don't get any feedback, but just as a reference, because a lot of people, they just have their own attorneys, so people they can consult with. But typically the people who are going into fractionals are people who can make that commitment, the high volume, but they need to book and cancel on short notice, 24 hours or less. They're not, they can't have a lot of peak days because, and peak days, not even the surcharges, but the movement, the flights and things like that. So people who need that near ownership experience. So those are the people who are
and they pay for that
naturally in the fractional spot. I always say, fractional ownership is like being married, right? Jet cards are like a continued relationship, a steady dating. Maybe you're living together, but you could always move out.
Yeah.
And then on-demand charter is like Tinder, right? It's a bad analogy.
I'm right there with you.
But people, like I said, people do both. I have quite a few subscribers who are in multiple jet card programs, and then I have, like I said, 50% of our subscribers use charter brokers and operators on an ad hoc basis, and they have a local operator, Jack, that they like and they use. But the reason they go to a jet card is, the operator's great, I like the pricing, I like the service, but 2 out of the last 6 times they weren't available when I needed it.
Yeah,
right. And it becomes down to the pricing strategy and say, hey, I know consistently, I've got an owner and he's got a jet card, and he'll call and say, hey, what's the price on this trip? It's like, all right, hey, this is the price. And his jet card, because it's not a good trip, it's Greenville, South Carolina to Memphis.
Right.
Like, that's not a good trip. Use your jet card for that one,
Right, yeah.
Now, I'm sure the jet card folks that are selling the cards don't want that trip either.
No. But that's where they're competitive, right?
But that's the competition.
Yeah.
And so, it's not like everybody's doing the Teterboro Palm Beach.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so those jet cards become much more valuable in those other instances.
Yeah.
Where you have these, tier 2, tier 3 airport to airport type scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. When you're not out of a major airport and you're going
Right.
somewhere else. Yeah.
I think the other thing that the jet cards and the fractional programs really do a good service for the industry is once you've given somebody money, you're more likely to do the incremental trips. And it's your daughter, and I hear it all the time, the person's balancing the risk of wiring $200,000 to somebody versus, their daughter says, I was able to get Taylor Swift's. My friend can get Taylor Swift concert tickets in Miami. Dad, I really want to go.
Yeah.
If it was, I have to price the trip out in this.
Yeah.
If it's you send a text message and say, we want to leave Friday morning at 10 a.m., come back Saturday.
And he knows it's 5 hours at $10,000 an hour.
Yeah.
That it's an easier, less brain. You're burning less brain power.
The other thing I would say, and you see these stories, and Robert Frank did a really good story on CNBC about the charter market about a month ago, and I was talking to him. And Rob Wiesenthal with Blade, they just do on-demand charter, was saying that he thought probably 90% of people who had chartered in the first year or two after COVID had gone back and left the industry. And I told Robert, I said, our research that we do shows 95% of our subscribers who started flying privately during COVID or after are still flying privately.
Interesting.
But over 80% of our subscribers are in a programmatic offering, fractional jet card or membership. And so, I think this industry throws a lot of stones, right?
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, what an on-demand broker is doing, what a great operator and management company is doing, we're all in the same fish tank.
Yeah.
And it's that ecosystem that makes that the whole fish tank, stronger. So.
It's funny, I've got a friend that works for a large fractional provider, and he's always saying, oh man, I'm losing all these deals to charter companies. And I'm looking at him and I'm saying, oh, I'm losing all these deals to fractional providers, right? It's like we both don't know. There's the deal flow.
Everyone looks at what they lost. It's
exactly.
the glass half full.
Exactly,
glass.
yeah.
And the thing I really like being able to talk to the end customer and then with our comparisons and database is I think there's a market segment for everybody.
Yeah.
And I almost, the biggest thing I wish companies would more sell the benefits of, being an on-demand broker, being an operator, as opposed to knocking the other solutions.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you have a lake house, you need an SUV.
Yeah.
If you want to go to the beach, you don't just say, oh, why do you need a convertible?
Yeah.
Different solutions for different needs.
And to that point, we talked about it earlier about the brokers and the brokers' role in all this. The operators are so focused on making their company safe.
Right.
Managing the pilot sector and training and maintenance and all that has become so, cumbersome. I mean, it's hard. It's very hard, and especially with 90% of the operators in the world have less than 8 airplanes.
Right.
They can't scale. It's very tough. We were talking one the other day. They want to get to Argus Platinum. Should be Argus Platinum. They can't get a safety officer, and they don't have the SMS program.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, that costs money.
Right.
Oh, okay, I need that. Well, where am I going to get it? So they've relied on the broker to get them to X, Y, and Z, and they're like, hey, why do I need a sales force? The brokers are giving me the business. They're like, great, this is awesome. And so there is no cookie cutter program. You're right, and I think that these things have evolved. Now there's jet card programs specifically on certain private jets.
Yeah.
It's like, I remember one guy years ago. You probably remember the guy had Palms Pass, and it was just a Teterboro, Palm Beach.
Yeah.
You get 10 trips a year.
Yeah.
So I think over time there's been all these little things that have popped up because there is no cookie cutter.
Right.
And they've had to be very strategic, just from the standpoint of, hey, I got to survive.
Right.
We got to be competitive. And to your point, 65 different, that's competition.
Yeah, I know. And
What's the leg up? Well, my leg up is my cancellation term. Well, what is it? There's 10 of them.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the qualifying questions we ask is, are you going to, need to move the flight or, cancel it after you book, especially in the last 48 to 72 hours. And, a lot of people are no, but when you talk to people, and that's also the call outs, there's a segment of the market, and I just ran into this with some subscribers in Chicago who go out to, it was Vail or Aspen. If the snow isn't good, they don't want to go out.
Yeah.
So they don't want to be saddled with, they hear, Wednesday that the weather is bad. In Aspen, why are we going from Chicago to Aspen if we can't go skiing?
Yeah.
And so, for a jet car, that's what a good 48-hour or 24-hour call-out works.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's where charter's going to end up going. I think pricing, yes, you always see pricing move on a downward market. Sure. But I think to be competitive, I'm confident you'll see charter cancellation terms start to really loosen up, especially one-way terms.
Right.
I think you're seeing a lot more one-way providers move away from the 100% upon booking and closer to that 72-hour.
Yeah.
I'm confident with that.
Well, and listen, I know in the old days, there's no harm, no foul, right? It's like, hey,
did I lose business?
We didn't, everybody can say, hey, I lost all this business, but did you really?
Yeah.
And so you can never quantify that. But what you can quantify is that relationship and what that value is to you as a company. And we talked about it earlier with Wargo at Fly Alliance, and being able to, hey, we got to manage the customer's expectation, but also, hey, we do have a thing in place, but we have to be flexible.
Yeah.
And if you're not flexible in today's world, you're not going to get the business.
Yeah. Flyhouse has launched their app this year, and we're starting to see more in that ecosystem. What are your clients saying about the new apps? What do they really like, and what are some of the struggles they're having with them?
Oh, wow. I'm not sure if it's a good question or a loaded question. I think
it's both.
Yeah. I think what you guys are doing is good. Innovation takes time.
Yeah.
We're in the first inning of, technology and things, booking technology that's really going to be an improvement for the customers. 2 years ago, I was at eBase, and Al White from CJI was moderating a session with Oliver from Avinode, and then Nick Hausman.
Yep.
And so Nick was talking about, I think the subject was what's going to come first, the click-to-clunk bookings, they click, and that's instant booking, price, this and that, or eVTOLs.
Yeah.
And Nick Hausman was talking about, I guess in the early 2000s, he was at Bombardier when they bought Skyjet. And everyone said click-to-clunk was 6 months away.
Right.
And so I think what you guys are doing is great because it's introducing a new channel in a new way.
Yep.
And, people are going to try it and find out it's for them. Other people are going to go back and say, I want a broker because, I got all these quotes back, but I don't know the difference between... And, then people are going to come up with hybrids where, a platform direct to the operator, but also some type of professional assistance. And so I think what's going to happen is things are going to evolve, and there are always going to be new ways to access the market. And hopefully the market keeps growing, and can support everyone. The biggest challenge that you guys have is you're in a very, very difficult, challenging business where there's lots of moving parts. I've sat in a couple brokers. They've let me sit in their office for the day and watch how the sausage is made.
It's easy. It's not that complicated.
It's
Okay.
it's wild.
Yeah, wild is.
But you know, I think, and obviously being an operator now, majority of the operators don't think outside the box.
Yeah.
And so it's created the other side of the business, which is the brokers, the jet cards, all that, because the operators haven't done that. And it's no fault to the operator. It takes money to do that.
Yeah. It's hard to operate airplanes
and it's hard to operate.
And hire pilots.
But you know, we had a conversation this morning talking about operators and being able to say yes. So we always say, hey, yeah, we're in the yes business. Find a way to get it done. Don't care how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
You know, I just want the airplane to show up.
Right.
And so that's the unique part, because there is no cookie cutter.
Right.
There's all these little things popping up. Yeah, it is disrupting something that's never been done before, it's difficult. It's tough. And being able to solve it, but stay consistent in doing it, is going to be the other side of the coin. Right.
Jack, where do you see the difference between maybe a traditional click-to-book app versus kind of what the Flyhouse app's doing?
Well, I mean, listen, from an operator perspective, we've got almost 1,500 aircraft on our platform today.
Right.
We did a soft launch the 1st of May. We'll be fully loaded by January 1st, and we'll have 2,000 airplanes on the app. The difference between, obviously, we talked about this before, Jet ASAP being a lead gen.
Right.
Flyhouse is a actual booking. So we're not contacting the operator. Again, we talk about frictionless. The operator, we want the operators. We need the operator schedule. If the airplane is available, then the system will book that trip. So we're not just calling. We're not picking up the phone going, "Hey, are you available? Hey, I need $500 off." No.
Right.
We want to be complete. You tell us what the pricing is, and the system's going to price it. You can go into your portal and figure out why you missed the trips.
Yeah.
Hey, you want more trips? Great. Here's the data.
Yeah.
We talked about the data with WingX this morning.
Here's the cost for that Phenom 300 that these trips are booking at.
Yeah. So I think the difference is being able to, and it's just like the broker calling the operator for the trip. If I quote 100 trips and you don't book any, then I'm going to be less susceptible to continue to work with that broker. If Flyhouse is actually booking your airplane and continue your airplane to move, the other side of the coin is, listen, we're giving our partners, we're giving them ownership in Flyhouse. That's something. What is that, really? You now become owners of Flyhouse. Yeah. Why? Because we want to bring you closer. If you put your airplane on our platform, meaning on our certificate, we're giving you ownership in Flyhouse.
Right.
We're trying to create this community that's the community's never been done before from an operator perspective. Right, and the operators have failed because, again, we always say, why does a broker put their stuff on your airplane? Well, that's because the operators doesn't do a good job of marketing.
Yeah.
And at no fault of them, they just don't know how to do it. And so, it's created. When I first started, 24 years ago, there was 3 brokers in the world.
Okay.
Now there's 3,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't mean all 3,000 are bad, but what it means is the scale of it. It's so wide. It's a wide range now. That net's big.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot more offers as of recent come from the jet card, not as much fraction, but jet card providers. When someone says, "Hey, 2 free hours," I don't want to throw Kevin under the bus, but Kevin at Fly Alliance, the first flight's free.
Yeah.
Nothing's free, right? Are they just amortizing that back in, or are they saying, "Hey, we're going to take a loss"? Where are you seeing those offers come from?
Well, so that's an interesting perspective, because when I look at private jet card comparisons, we're trying to get people to pay us $500 to subscribe. So we do advertising, we do Google AdWords and all of that stuff. And so I know about the cost of acquisition from digital marketing, et cetera, et cetera. And
it's a marketing expense?
Yeah, because, if you say,
so.
What does it cost to generate a jet card customer? Is it $10,000? Is it $5,000? Is it $25,000? And so when I write about the deal and they get PR about the deal, and we don't get anything on the back end, we're just, writing about the things. If they pick up some jet card leads because they offered a couple hours free, and they all have lists of like 900,000 people, right?
Yeah.
And they blast out the offers. If that's
only good this month.
Yeah.
Got to create that urgency
until next month.
Yeah.
And so if if they offer that deal and they gave, $20,000 in 2 hours free, whatever it is, the retail value of those hours, but it was a click on an email that they sent to this database they already have versus having to spend money with Google.
Yeah.
So
they're looking at the lifetime value of a customer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, that 20,000.
Right. We'll take a hit here, but we know in the long term we're going to get it.
After a year or 2 years, we're going to make that up.
And you see it all the time when there's a company that's in the news because they have financial problems.
Yeah.
Right away, people are out there offering, if you're a customer with X, we'll give you, buy our 100 or 200,000 and we'll give you these extra credits.
Just happened with Velato, right?
Velato,
Fly
Wheels,
exclusive.
do you remember Wheels Up last
year? Oh my God,
year? Everyone was doing Wheels Up deals. Today, listen, everyone wants to write the obituaries. Today they just announced that they're buying Grandview. And,
with what money?
Well, they got $330 million more from Bank of America.
This was breaking news today?
Yeah. They also have, listen, NetJets has Berkshire Hathaway. Delta Airlines last year, I think they're a $50 billion company, net profits of over $5 billion. So
I was told that Wheels Up is a rounding error on Delta's books, really.
It's part of the strategy. And so my career, I started writing about the airlines back in the 80s. American opened hubs in Raleigh-Durham, in Nashville, and San Jose.
Right.
And the guy who opened them, Bob Crandall, was the smartest guy, one of the best airline CEOs ever. He invented the frequent flyer, not invented, but And so Ed Bastian, who I think is probably the best airline CEO of the past 10 years, believes that private aviation is going to melt. There's a synergy there.
That vertical alignment.
Yeah. And everyone can say, people have tried it, it hasn't been done. But, most of the biggest breakthroughs are by people who, are doubled down on it. So, time will tell.
But it's the whole point of having lift.
Yeah.
So that's why they wanted to do it, because they need lift.
Yeah.
You need seats.
And I think they look at the consumer demand, right? And we were talking to the WingX guys about that consumer demand, and they're moving out of Citation 10s, and they're moving out of the XLs and into the Phenom 300 because that's fitting the consumer demand.
And they want the Challenger 300 because if you look at the Delta corporate account base, a lot of blue chip. The Citation 10 is a great airplane, great coast-to-coast pricing. But not everyone wants to fly 5 hours in a Citation 10. Some people want the stand-up cabin. And so, as the Citation 10s exit the Vista fleets and the Wheels Up fleet, there'll be some other operator that takes their place, and they'll be offering a jet card program with $30,000.
Coast to coast one.
It's like what you see in the airline business. One discount airline goes away, and then you've got Spirit. And, look at Allegiant, right? And so there's always going to be a market for people who can get you from A to B at the lowest price, and there are always going to be people who want, are willing to pay a premium or pay more money for a better experience.
Speaking of the guys at Velato, is there a way to spot those bad offers and with a downturn in the market? Theoretically, we're going to lose a couple companies, right? And people are going to lose deposits or lose money. How do you, when people ask you about, hey, is this a good buy or is my money safe? Is there a couple things that you advise clients to say, all right, these guys are good or they're not going to go bankrupt, or is there any way to predict that?
The first thing we say is we don't provide a financial analysis. We do report on the financials of publicly traded companies. But, private company, you don't know. And, people are like, point to the publicly traded companies. We have a couple stories about, things to look for. But, in any industry, good companies can make bad decisions. They change their business strategy in terms of their fleet and things like that. I think sometimes when you look at some of these fleet programs, if you ask why did they choose a specific aircraft type, well, the one that they wanted wasn't available, and so they went to plan B, and what they should have maybe done is not done anything at all. Now, having said that, when JetSuite, which when they grounded themselves, went bankrupt. They're still flying as a small Part 135, but the first couple months where people were very upset that they had lost their money. The one thing I found is when these things happen, people don't go back to the airlines or driving. They find another program.
Yep.
But the most interesting thing, they were a value provider. So I got a bunch of subscriptions, new subscribers, people looking for place. Where were you flying before Jet Suite? Well, I had a JetSmarter membership, and before that I was with Avant Air. When Jet went down, well, where were you before that? I was with Jetted and Avant Air.
Yeah.
And so there are people who are looking for I actually started on my website, I call it the Jet Card Haircut Calculator. And what it is, and I got it was an idea. Most of what I do is, ideas from subscribers.
Yeah.
The subscriber was telling me after he got done with being upset with Jet Suite, he realized he had lost like 50 or 60,000 bucks. But he had flown like in the previous 3 years or 2 years, 500,000 at a very good rate, right? So when he added the money he lost to the money he spent, the hours that they flew him, and he divided it out, he said, I still did well.
Yeah.
I still did better than I would have with
if he
brands
bought
A and
another
B.
jet card.
And so, one of the, and so people are always going to go after, there are people who are always looking
flyers
for,
or that lowest, the absolute bottom dollar.
and that's why we're agnostic.
Yeah.
I have people who only want to fly on brands A, B, and C.
Yeah.
And then there are other people who come in and say, I don't care about a fully enclosed lab. I'll take a Lear 31 or 35, cheap.
Yeah.
So different strokes.
For the first time flyer that's coming into the business, is transitioning, maybe they sold a company or anything like that. What first thing is probably buy a jet card comparison subscription.
Yeah, well, that's a given, yes. But
and then what do you typically tell them to how to analyze? All right, I want to take my first trip, or I want to start flying privately. How do I look at getting into this space?
So we tell them, if you don't know where you're going to fly, you don't have some specific trips coming up in the next 6 months, don't buy a jet card until you do. Use a broker. If you have, and we always say, and this because what you said, 3,000 brokers, probably more.
Yeah.
And there's no certifications and things like that.
Maybe that's what we need. We need, Doug. We need a ranking, a broker, charter broker ranking.
Ask friends, because you'll have friends.
Somebody knows somebody
that had a good experience or a bad experience.
And they'll tell you that after their 10 years of chartering, here are 2 brokers who are really good. Do some trips with them. Don't buy a jet card until because it's very programmed, destination and all of the specifics I talked about in the rules. And the other thing too, you're asking about protection. Don't give anybody more money than you're going to spend in the next 6 to 18 months. Most of these programs have a 12-month rate lock or an 18-month rate lock. You'll be able to negotiate when you go through your funds. There's no reason to buy more. But people, I don't want to say it's a laziness, but people sit there and they've had a good experience. The salesperson comes back, says, by the end of the month, if you buy an extra 50 hours, we'll give you
that. Are you going to get free hours? Your first trip's free. I mean, there's some gimmicks there.
Those are good. Those are offers. Those are good offers.
100%.
It's there's sophisticated selling processes too.
Exactly.
They're made to get people to buy these hours. And that's what I was always told is never buy more hours than you need, because they'll always sell you more. They'll always sell you more hours, right? Doug, if someone wants to get in contact with you, wants to buy a subscription, what's the best way to do that?
So go to the website. It's all digital, privatejetcardcomparisons.com. I know it's a mouthful. There's an S at the end, privatejetcardcomparisons.com. If they don't want to give us the $500 right away, it's good for a year, by the way, the subscription. But they can sign up for a free newsletter, so they get the breaking news and some cool stuff like that. And then the interesting thing with the subscription is they have access to us while the subscription is live, that 12 months. And so we have quite a few people, they'll join one program because maybe they have like New York to Palm Beach or New York to Naples or something like that. But maybe that program doesn't also cover the Caribbean with guaranteed rates and things. And so we just say, listen, when trips come up, new trips that weren't in the original request, the custom analysis request, just fill in another custom analysis and tell us what you're doing, and we'll see. Sometimes there's a good program that's supplemental for just the Caribbean or Mexico or Hawaii or something like that. And so our service, we always say, we're here as much or as little as you need.
Yeah.
And I've got to tell you, nobody has ever abused it. We hear from them when they need to buy. It's really dealing with the same people you guys do, which are really successful people who built up businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs. They're fun people to deal with. At the holidays, I have subscribers who own wineries. I don't know what the people in my building think, but I get cases of wine.
Nice. That's a good perk of the job.
I have one guy, he's got invested in some type of lobster business. I get lobsters.
Nice.
I have another one who's a big walnut farmer. He asked me, he goes, do you know what and I don't really look them up. He said, do you know what my business is? I said, I don't know. He said, I'm a biggest walnut farmer in a specific state. And he said, do you like walnuts? And I said, sure.
Yeah.
It was a box. It was huge.
A year's worth of walnuts?
It was it was like in like a huge garbage bag of walnuts. And so I had my girlfriend Google like how much. It must have been like a few $1,000s of walnuts. And so I really I say I have the best job in the world because I like the people in the industry. It's a great industry. The industry does a lot of good. It creates jobs. It provides access. And the people who use the service appreciate what you guys are doing. They may not, if the plane's late, you hear it when things go wrong, but I can tell you that everyone in this hall is doing something that really adds value to the community and to these entrepreneurs, helps make them more successful.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
It's all about service.
Yeah.
But you are the master educator here. It was a pleasure spending some time with you.
Yeah,
I really am honored that you guys invited me on your podcast.
Appreciate
and I'm big fans of both of you guys. And like I said, it's a great industry. And, kumbaya, let's just all get along and get more people flying privately, right?
Christmas
Absolutely.
dinner at Doug's house with the wine and walnuts.
That's
true.
it.
Yeah.
And some lobsters.
Yeah, exactly. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you,
Really
Dan.
appreciate it.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
again.
Appreciate it.
Thank
All
you.
right, man.
Thanks so
Yeah,
much, Doug.
thanks.
Thank you. You got it.